Newswatch magazine presents the analysis of world news in the light of Bible prophecy with David J. Smith.
It grieves me to have to say the words that I do today, but any time in ancient Israel when God Almighty saw that the king of Israel had turned his back upon the ways of God and led the nation into error, he always sent someone to say words to that individual and called out to him to change his ways and repent. In Ezekiel chapter 33, God refers to the end of the age today. He says in verse 1 through 7, "Again the word of the Lord came unto me, saying, Son of man, speak to the children of Israel, or the children of your people. Say unto them, When I bring a sword upon the land, if the people of the land take a man of their coast and set him for their watchman, if when he sees the sword come upon the land, he blow the trumpet and warn the people, then whosoever hears the sound of the trumpet and takes not warning, if the sword comes and takes him away, his blood is upon his own head. He heard the sound of the trumpet and took not warning. His blood shall be upon him, but he that takes warning shall deliver his soul. But if the watchman see the sword come and blow not the trumpet, and the people be not warned, if the sword come and take any person from among them, he is taken away in his iniquity, but the blood will I require at the watchman's hand. So you, O son of man, I have set you a watchman unto the house of Israel. Therefore you shall hear the word at my mouth, and warn them for me." God Almighty, for some reason, has made known to me many things that are happening in the United States of America today. Every single time something needs to be said, He always furnishes the proof and the documentation. It never fails. For some reason, on March 7th, 1997, Mr. Bill Clinton, current President of the United States, held a press conference. And there was a question and statements made by a reporter toward the end of it, and his answer is what I want to discuss at the very close of this message today. It will hold great portent for the Christian in America today. But I want to give you a background as to why I believe this is going to be very important to begin with. And you must have a 30-year history of the dishonesty, the corruption, and the reckless ambition of Mr. Bill Clinton in order for you to understand the final statements that I'm going to make about his news conference. Very early in life, Mr. Clinton was teased in high school because he constantly ran for one office after another. They actually nicknamed him in high school Billy Vote Clinton by his classmates. Then as he grew up, he did not want to be a part of the Vietnamese War. So Mr. Bill Clinton evaded the draft because of the Vietnam War. In December of 1969, while he was a student at Oxford in England, he wrote a letter which was notarized by his ROCT officer, Colonel Eugene Holmes, before he was elected president in 1992. And I want to quote a part of that so that you can understand what his position was. Quote, "I've written and spoken and marched against the war. One of my roommates is a draft resistor. He is one of the bravest, best men I know. I decided to accept the draft in spite of my beliefs for one reason: to maintain my political viability within the system." End of quote. So Mr. Bill Clinton did not become an official draft dodger, even though he connived and worked his way around while over in England so that he would never have to go into the war. And the very reason for it was so that he could come back to the United States of America and he could run for political office, because his ambition from his high school days was to become President of the United States. While over in Oxford, England, there was a Jesuit priest, a very liberal activist and a professor at Georgetown University by the name of Father Richard McSorley. He wrote a book in 1977. The book's title was Peace Eyes. He said in that book that Bill Clinton actually participated in anti-war demonstrations outside the United States Embassy in London, England. And he gave specific dates of November 15th, 16th of 1969. And he quoted a conversation in his book, quote, "As I was waiting for the ceremony to begin, Bill Clinton of Georgetown, then studying as a Rhodes Scholar at Oxford, came up and welcomed me. He was one of the organizers," end of quote. So Mr. Bill Clinton has a sordid background of calling for demonstrations against the United States involvement in any type of activity called war, because he does not want the United States of America to succeed and actually be a global cop. He does not want the United States to remain a sovereign nation, which I will show to you before this is through. This Father McSorley's account put Bill Clinton squarely in the lead of the demonstrations right there in London, England. The demonstrations were held by World Peace Council, which was documented by the FBI and also the Subcommittee on Un-American Activities in the Senate as a Soviet KGB front group. Yet Bill Clinton was an organizer for that organization. But what about his path to power today? After returning home from England, Mr. Bill Clinton began a series of campaign adventures, culminating in his rise up the political ladder at a very young age. In 1970, he worked in Joseph Duffy's failed campaign and became an anti-war Democratic senator from Connecticut. And this man had actually protested against the war himself. And Mr. Bill Clinton, fellow protester, was there campaigning for him in Connecticut. In 1972, he came to Texas and actually was the coordinator for the ultra-liberal Senator George McGovern in his failed presidential bid. Also in 1974, Bill Clinton lost an election as a Democratic candidate for the United States Congress against conservative Arkansas Representative John Paul Hammersmith. So that was his first time to run personally. But in 1976, Mr. Bill Clinton was finally elected Attorney General for Arkansas. Then in 1978, he was elected governor of Arkansas at the age of 32. Mr. Bill Clinton's record as Arkansas's governor was one of raising taxes 151 times in his 12 years as governor. He pardoned violent criminals, many of them on death row. He repeatedly involved himself in conflicts of interest. He gave a drug dealer fat state contracts that made him rich. He allowed campaign contributors to foul the land of Arkansas. Due to all of these factors that I've mentioned, and to his super feeling of himself, he and his youthful appointees, all of them in their 20s, many voters turned out and they put Clinton out of office after his first 2-year term as governor. Scandals that marked Clinton's first gubernatorial term included the following. Clinton commuted the life sentence of James Seride, who was a convicted murderer who killed again very shortly after his release from prison. Also, state auditor charged that state workers used taxpayer money to actually fund Bill Clinton for governor campaign activities while Clinton was still the Attorney General in 1978. So he has a long history of tampering with funds and misusing them. Mr. Bill Clinton campaigned tirelessly after losing the re-election. He joined the choir at a local Baptist church that had weekly services that were broadcast on TV. He positioned himself directly behind the choir director so that every time the choir was shown on television, there he was singing. Also, Hillary Clinton decided that she had to get herself fixed up because she didn't fit the mold of a governor's wife. She never used the name of Clinton until 1980, I guess it was about 1982. She changed her name finally from Hillary Rodham to Hillary Clinton to soften her image because she was known in Arkansas as a radical feminist. So she had to change her name so that she would take away that harshness from the public view. Mr. Bill Clinton, who won the election as governor in 1982, he remained in the governor's mansion for 12 years. During his time in office, Mr. Bill Clinton made several key moves that actually furthered his ultimate goal of becoming President of the United States. In 1986, Mr. Clinton was elected to his first four-year term. It used to be 2 years until then, and he got it changed to a four-year term so that he wouldn't have to campaign but once instead of twice in a four-year period. So he became governor, and he promised the people of the state that he would not quit as governor to run for the presidency if they would re-elect him for a second four-year term. But during his final campaign for re-election as governor, he promised to serve the entire 4 years, never thinking of becoming president. Then, in 1992, he declared himself released from that pledge to serve his full term so that he could run. Mr. Bill Clinton's governorship was marked with repeated conflicts of interest. Only the closed political system, only Democrats in the state of Arkansas, would make it available for him to survive politically. Some of those conflicts of interest were Mr. Roger Clinton. The governor's brother was convicted in January of 1985 of cocaine possession and conspiracy to distribute cocaine. At the time of his arrest, Roger Clinton was working for a man by the name of Dan Lassiter. He was a major contributor to Bill Clinton's first campaign for governor. 4 months after Roger Clinton went to jail, Lassiter received $750,000 in commissions from the sale of state bonds. So here once again is a conflict of interest. The vice president of Lassiter's firm told the FBI that Lassiter got the contract to sell the state's bonds because he had the right connections with Governor Clinton. It was widely known among state law enforcement officials as early as 1983 that both Roger Clinton and his employer, Dan Lassiter, were under investigation by the FBI for illicit drug use. In 1986, Lassiter was convicted of cocaine distribution and spent time in a halfway house. He was actually under arrest. But Bill Clinton pardoned Lassiter 1 week after his re-election to his fifth term as governor of Arkansas. Another conflict of interest was Mr. Bill Clinton's mother, then known as Virginia Dwyer. She was working as a nurse anesthesiast in Hot Springs, Arkansas. She was investigated by state authorities after a 17-year-old girl died under questionable circumstances while Clinton's mother was on duty. Clinton's mother admitted in a separate 1983 case, quote, that she often read the racing form and filed her nails while administering anesthesia, end of quote. The Arkansas medical examiner, Mr. Frank Malik, cleared Clinton's mother of all wrongdoing, and Clinton raised Malik's salary to make him the second highest paid official in Arkansas state government, all because of the cover-up of his mother. Then during his 1992 campaign for the presidency, candidate Mr. Bill Clinton finally admitted to the American people, after years of persistent questioning by reporters and years of denial by him, that he tried marijuana in his youth, but he said, "I didn't inhale." But there is a major problem here because it was recorded on cassette tape and it was given to the FBI that Mr. Bill Clinton, his own brother, said his nose was the way it was because he was like a human vacuum sweeper when it came to cocaine. Mr. Bill Clinton has been referred to as a very unreputable womanizer. In his 1992 campaign for president, it was dogged by consistent rumors of extramarital affairs. In fact, campaign staff members began referring to the continuing revelations about his sexual escapades as bimbo eruptions because they always created problems. A woman by the name of Sally Perdue came forward. She was a former Miss Arkansas, whose home Clinton reportedly visited on several occasions for sexual activities during the 1980s. She alleged that Clinton smoked marijuana in her presence, contradicting his earlier statement that he smoked pot on a limited basis in his Oxford days in England. Then there was a Jennifer Flowers. Her alleged 12-year affair with Mr. Bill Clinton became public when she played tapes of her steamy phone calls with Clinton for the national media. During the affairs, Flowers received a state job due to Clinton's influence, even though she ranked 9th out of 11th on a merit test. She still got the job. Tap phone conversations captured Clinton instructing Flowers just to say nothing if reporters came to her. Then there was Paula Corbin Jones. While an employee of the Arkansas Industrial Development Commission on May 8, 1991, Paula Corbin, who was later married to Steve Jones, therefore Paula Corbin Jones, she was approached by an Arkansas state trooper at a convention exhibit booth that she was working in. Corbin, then in her mid-20s, was told that the governor wanted to see her in his room. About 20 minutes later, Corbin returned to the booth, told two co-workers that Governor Clinton had made sexual advances toward her. She rejected them, and he wanted even more perverted sexual activity, and she would have nothing to do with it. Public records disclosed that the Clinton for President campaign paid a man by the name of Jack Palladino, a notorious San Francisco private investigator, $93,000 minimum to help counter his image as a womanizer. Then there's always the Whitewater fiasco that has plagued Mr. Clinton and his wife ever since they've been in the White House. This is the best known scandal about the Clintons. The story actually began in 1978, and it's intertwined with at least two other scandals: the failure of Madison Guaranty Savings and Loan and the improper efforts of the Clinton administration officials to tamper with that investigation by the Resolution Trust Corporation. In 1978, pertaining to the Whitewater incident, Bill and Hillary Clinton joined a partnership called the Whitewater Development Corporation. They purchased 203 acres in the Arkansas Ozarks to build vacation homes. In 1984, in March, Mrs. Clinton received her first $2,000 a month payment to help Madison Guaranty Savings and Loan fight efforts by regulators to close it down. The savings and loan was owned by the Clintons' Whitewater partner, Mr. James McDougal. It was at this point that money from the Madison Savings and Loan was being diverted to the Whitewater project, according to the investigators. In 1984 and 1985, the Clintons improperly deducted $5,133 on their federal income taxes for Whitewater interest expenses. Then in 1987, McDougal personally delivered Whitewater records to the governor's mansion at Mrs. Clinton's request. In 1989, Madison Guaranty Savings and Loan was finally declared insolvent. Then it was shut down by the federal government. But in March of 1992, the New York Times reported ties between McDougal and the Clintons, their connection to Whitewater, and their illegal tax deductions. The Clinton campaign denied that Mrs. Clinton ever received $2,000 a month to fight the regulators. This denial was corrected by the White House 20 months later when all the evidence had come in. What else could they do? And from March to November of 1992, employees from the Rose Law Firm in Little Rock, where Mrs. Clinton was a senior partner, said that she summoned couriers from the firm to the governor's mansion on numerous occasions during the campaign. She would hand them sealed, unmarked envelopes full of documents with instructions to shred them at the firm's downtown office. The shredding began after the appearance of the New York Times article on March 8, 1992. In December of 1992, after the election, the Clintons sold their half of the Whitewater development to McDougal and claimed a $1,000 capital gain on their tax returns. The sale was arranged by Vince Foster, the Clintons' personal attorney and Mrs. Clinton's partner in the Rose Law Firm. In July 20th of 1993, Vince Foster was found dead under mysterious circumstances. He had been shot in the head. The official ruling was suicide. Whitewater documents were secretly removed from his office by administration officials before any investigators into the death of Vince Foster could go into the office. But October 27th, 1993, the first criminal referral by the Resolution Trust Corporation in its investigation into the Madison Savings or Guarantee Savings and Loan was rejected by Paula Casey, the United States Attorney in Little Rock. She was also a former law student of Bill Clinton's. On November 3rd, 1993, Associate Attorney General Webster Hubbell, a former law partner of Mrs. Clinton, recused himself from the Whitewater case. That's a legal term which means he just stepped aside and would not continue. Then on November the 9th, 1993, Paula Casey also stepped aside from the probe of Whitewater's ties to the Madison Savings and Loan and was replaced by a Justice Department prosecutor. Republicans called for a special counsel to investigate the Whitewater-Madison affair. So on January 20th, 1994, Mr. Robert B. Fisk, Jr. was appointed as special counsel to investigate Whitewater. Then on February the 2nd, 1994, Gene Lewis, the senior criminal investigator in the Resolution Trust Corporation in Kansas City, was told in a meeting with the Washington Resolution Trust Corporation official by the name of April Breslaw that people at the top, meaning the White House, would be happier if the RTC findings got them off the hook. Lewis later sought protection under whistleblower laws after being pressured by Washington, the White House, to scale back her characterization of the Madison failure as a highly prosecutable case of check kiting. So she actually stepped aside and went under the law as a whistleblower, government protection, so that she could tell the truth as to what she had found out about the Whitewater incident and Bill and Hillary Clinton's being a part of it. On May 5th, 1994, Special Prosecutor Fisk subpoenaed the White House to turn over all documents relating to Vince Foster's death. On June 30th, 1994, Fisk said his grand jury probe found insufficient evidence for criminal charges. Questions were raised about Fisk's ability to conduct an impartial investigation. Why? Because he also was linked to the White House and Clinton. On August 5th, 1994, this was amid calls for further investigations. Kenneth Starr was named independent counsel to head the Whitewater probe. On December 6, 1994, Webster Hubbell pleaded guilty to 2 felony counts prepared by Starr. So the whole scenario is beginning to crumble at the feet of Bill and Hillary Clinton, when one of their top legal authorities and one of those in the Rose law firm pleaded guilty. Then in 1995, Starr's Whitewater investigation continued. Both chambers of the Congress held hearings to determine whether crimes were committed by the president and his wife. Jim Guy Tucker, who was Clinton's lieutenant governor and succeeded Governor Clinton as governor of Arkansas, and Whitewater partners Susan and James McDougal, all 3 were indicted as a result of an ongoing Whitewater investigation. So the Whitewater investigation is going to be a very failing stab in the heart of Bill and Hillary Clinton if they ever bring it forth and all the facts. But what about Vince Foster's death? On July 20th, 1993, Vincent Foster was found dead in a Washington, D.C. park. His death was ruled a suicide, but many questions remain unanswered. It appeared his body had been transported to Fort Marcy Park after Foster was already dead. This was based upon eyewitness reports, blood stains, and carpet fibers that were on his body. The manner in which Foster's hand gripped the gun when his body was found was in an awkward way in order for anyone to shoot themselves. A Dr. James Beyer, the coroner in the Foster case, once before had a mistaken murder for a suicide. That was in 1989. Was it a mistake, or did somebody talk to him? The suicide note that Vince Foster apparently left is a great source of mystery also. It was released by White House officials 9 days after Foster's death. Why? Where was it during those 9 days? The strange thing is it had no fingerprints, none of Foster's fingerprints. It made no reference to suicide. Contrary to standard practice, the files on the Foster investigation and the autopsy were never released to the public. Why? What would it have shown? Would it have incriminated anyone in the White House? White House officials repeatedly inferred that the investigation by the United States Park Police was legal and it did not have to be turned over to the FBI. White House employees have testified they saw various Clinton officials in Vince Foster's office the night of his death, and their papers pertaining to the Whitewater affair and others were removed from Foster's office before investigators were even admitted to go into the office. Foster's close friends say that committing suicide was totally opposite to everything Vince Foster believed in. Bill Clinton angered the American military when he first came into office, from the top brass right on down to the rank and file. As soon as he became president, he kept trying to lift and open the ban on homosexuals serving in the military openly. He wanted them to have openness in every way. And although he called for an administration that looked like America, Most Americans reject homosexuality as being against the Bible and everything that God stands for. Even though he wanted to have an America in his administration which appealed to the real America, those out in the countryside, those who had values, he appointed immediately to government posts the same individuals that have been there since the days of Franklin Delano Roosevelt. The same organizations. Veterans and family members of service members were infuriated when Vice President Al Gore wrote a letter to the parents of one service member that was killed in Africa. Here's what was said on that particular piece of information. Mr. Al Gore said that they should be proud that their son died in service to the United Nations, not the United States. This is beginning to underscore everything I've said so far. An attitude within the Clinton administration that it should take its foreign policy lead from international bureaucrats at the United Nations. That's exactly what he's done. He has allowed the United Nations to usurp authority over the government of the United States. There are many things that Mr. Clinton has been involved in. One of them was called Cattlegate. This is what reporters began talking about as one of the scandals that faced Bill Clinton. Cattlegate exposed, I would say, the hypocrisy of the Clinton administration, who had staked their campaign in opposition to what they called a decade of greed. In other words, the Reagan and the Bush administration. The New York Times reported that in a one-year period from October 1978 to October of 1979, Hillary Rodham Clinton made in excess of $100,000 trading cattle futures. Thus, they called it Cattlegate. And then she got out of the market just as it began to collapse. Did she have inside information? She only reported that she made $1,000 on her income taxes. And yet, she made $5,300 in one day that she opened the account. Economist Paul Craig Roberts, who writes a syndicated column, he analyzed the details of the transactions that were made public. Here's what he said, and I quote, "Someone was obviously bending the rules for Hillary," end of quote. A former IRS career attorney said the deal had all the earmarks of a prearranged trade. Why am I telling you all of these things? I'm giving you the background of 30 years of dishonesty and corruption, even into the White House at this very moment, because of a news conference that was given March 7th, 1997, in which not one honest answer was given to the American people. Not one. Then there was Troopergate, as the newspapers called it. This was revealed after the 1992 elections, when Clinton was no longer governor and could not exact any retribution against the Arkansas state troopers, who began to come forward with allegations that Clinton regularly used a number of his officers to arrange extramarital sexual liaisons with a number of women. This was corroborated by stories of the women who made their encounters with Clinton public during the 1992 campaign. Clinton used troopers to send messages to women he wished to proposition. And in some cases, the troopers did the propositioning for him. And all this is documented by several state troopers, and they were willing to go to court with their testimony. Troopers reveal that Clinton typically had several ongoing, usually simultaneous affairs with various women, including a staffer in Clinton's office, an Arkansas lawyer that Clinton appointed to a judgeship, the wife of a prominent judge, a local reporter, an employee of Arkansas Power and Light, and a cosmetic sales clerk from a Little Rock, Arkansas department store. The troopers also revealed that Clinton had a habit of sneaking out of the governor's mansion after Hillary was asleep and invited women into the basement of the governor's mansion while they, the troopers, stood guard at the top of the steps. To me, this is amazing. This is 30 years of dishonesty. Would God Almighty actually rain blessings upon any nation that would allow its leadership to fall into such chaos, such ungodliness? One trooper that had assisted Bill Clinton in grading women on a scale of 1 to 10, and he was willing to testify in court. The troopers revealed that President-elect Clinton asked them to sneak women past the Secret Service agents at the governor's mansion at 4:45 in the morning, the very day that he was leaving Little Rock for the White House. One trooper says he stood guard at the top of the steps while Clinton and the woman disappeared into the shadows of the basement. According to Trooper Roger Perry, President Clinton telephoned fellow trooper Danny Ferguson and offered him a federal job in return for helping to stem the flow of all of these new revelations about his womanizing. Clinton reportedly told Ferguson that Perry could have a job also on the federal level. Clinton admitted calling Ferguson but denied that he offered him a job. Then there was Nannygate that has spoiled the Clinton administration. In the very first year of Bill Clinton's presidency, at least 27 nominees for high office were rejected for confirmation when it was revealed that they had illegally failed to pay Social Security taxes for these live-in nannies and other domestic servants. In fact, the very person in the White House responsible for the background checks on all potential nominees, William H. Kennedy III, was revealed to have failed to pay taxes as well on his live-in domestic help. Then there was a humorous Hairgate. This was a haircut that Bill Clinton got, and it's rather humorous, really. But Bill Clinton, according to the news, held up air traffic at the very busy Los Angeles International Airport for 45 minutes while he got a haircut while he was on board Air Force One. And he had a hairdresser by the name of Christophe, and he paid him $200 to cut his hair, but held up traffic for 45 minutes. Now that's more humorous than anything we've seen so far, because the rest is blatant sin. Then there was Travelgate that hit the newspapers. 7 employees of the White House Travel Office were fired shortly after Clinton's administration based on what were revealed to be trumped up allocations by the White House. And the very one that trumped them up was Mrs. Hillary Clinton. After the firings, the White House hired Clinton's 25-year-old cousin, Catherine Cornelius, to run the office, the travel office for the White House. She began to divert all the travel money and the business to a Little Rock, Arkansas travel agency with ties to the Clintons. When the situation finally came to light and the national news media began to investigate all of these government officials, 5 of the 7 that were fired were rehired. Cornelius, the relative of the Clintons, was removed from her travel office. The White House apologized for the episode. But it was another one of those things that shows 30 years of corruption and dishonesty in the Bill and Hillary Clinton camp. Bill Clinton appointees approved a mandatory AIDS training program for government federal employees. They said that it was abusive and harassing the employees who did not want to take it. One employee reported that her instructor discussed her grandmother's sexual practices right in front of her. Can you imagine having to undergo such intense scrutiny on a federal level? Well, this quickly hit the newspapers, and it gave the moral tone of what was happening in the White House. But something else very interesting began to happen. This was peculiar. It took place at the FAA, the Federal Aviation Administration. A 2-year investigation uncovered reports of communications with a 35,000-year-old spirit by the name of Ramtha. In addition to various financial ties between coordinators, contractors, and federal officials. One FAA employee suffered severe emotional trauma from the agency's training because of this spirit influence. They required hospitalization, extended leave of absence while undergoing psychiatric treatment, and unplanned retirement from federal service. The private contractor in charge of training the FAA, Mr. Gregory May and his associates are initiates of the Ramtha School of Enlightenment, a New Age demonic school controlled by demons. They communicate with their New Age cult leader named Ramtha, who they claim is 35,000 years old and a spirit. Former Ramtha students have characterized the school as steeped in mind control and a terrifying vision of the future, filled with apocalyptic visions of the end of the world. FAA training material was filled with New Age references, according to a government report. At congressional hearings in February of 1994, administration officials admitted under intense questioning that a full year after Clinton's administration, more than 100 of Clinton's top appointees in the White House, now this is where very strategic information can be found, had still not been given security clearances by the FBI, which required passing drug tests as well. And according to the Washington Times, a source in the Clinton administration stated, and I quote, that of 1,000 FBI background checks of Clinton's White House personnel, more than 500 revealed derogatory information that would have prevented the people from obtaining security clearances at the FBI, Defense Department, or the CIA. End of quote. And yet those same individuals that could not get another federal job because of their backgrounds were sitting in the White House and had never been screened and had never allowed the FBI to talk to them. There was a New York Times columnist by the name of William Safire. He actually, because of many things over the White House Travel Office episode in May of 1993 that Hillary Clinton stated, he actually stated in the New York Times that Hillary was a congenial liar. Now that was his words. I hope they don't seem too harsh to you. Those were his words. But what have we been seeing here through 30 years of dishonesty and corruption at every phase? God is not pleased with who's in the White House today, and judgment will come upon the United States of America as a direct result. Bill Clinton will not call the nation to turn back to God. No, he has other plans. Because you see, there was a woman by the name of Ruth Montgomery that wrote 2 books. One of them was called Aliens Among Us, the other Strangers Among Us. Both books talked about how spirit guides had told her that there is going to be aliens coming in large numbers toward the turn of the cycle, the year 2000. They also said that in the 1990s, a walk-in would be in the presidency of the United States. If you figure 1992, when Bill Clinton was elected, he is the only new president that came into the office in the 1990s, because he was re-elected in 1996 and will carry him to the year 2000. It just so happens that Bill and Hillary Clinton went to California, to a city that was founded by spiritists who raised the spirits, they called them, of the dead, but they were demons masquerading back while they were in the White House in their first term. Other people who go through the town drive rapidly because they feel the spirit influence and the demonic influence there. 2 years after a subpoena was issued for Hillary Clinton's Rose Law firm, their billing records, they accidentally were discovered sitting on a table in the first couple's private quarters by a White House employee named Carolyn Huber. Now, can you imagine something just sitting on a table for 2 years and nobody could see it? The billing records relate to another scheme, another real estate venture known as Castle Grande. If Hillary Clinton knowingly concealed these records, this would be a federal crime. Now, who else could have concealed them? There's only 2 people that had access to that private room. Soon after this revelation finally hit the newsstands, Hillary was ordered to explain herself under oath before a federal grand jury. This investigation is not yet resolved. It's still ongoing. And according to reports from that investigation and leaks, there is enough documents that they could actually convict Hillary Clinton, at least on perjury, which means lying to a grand jury. Former White House lawyer William Kennedy took part in the cleanup operation of Foster's Whitewater files, according to testimony heard by the grand jury. William Kennedy's own notes of a 1993 meeting with top White House officials shortly after Vincent Foster's death carried the notation, quote, "Vacuum Rose Law Files, WWDC Docs," meaning documents. And WWDC stood for Whitewater Development Corporation Documents. So he was to vacuum or clean up any possible documents that still might remain that could convict them in a court of law. They made, when Bill and Hillary Clinton went into the presidency, co-presidency of the United States, various appointments to office. Now you tell me if this is the average citizen of America. They said they wanted to have an administration that would be the cleanest in the last 30 years in the White House. I'm going to name some of those appointments and some of the things that they were responsible for. A woman by the name of Joycelyn Elders. This was Clinton's first Surgeon General. She was forced to resign after she advocated teaching elementary children how, and I hate to use this word in public, but how to masturbate. She had been controversial from the beginning, promoting an agenda of aggressive sex education, condom distribution, and abortion upon demand. Elders said that she wanted the government to give prostitutes the contraceptive Norplant so they could use sex, if they must, to buy their drugs. Those were her words. She was pro-choice. She told pro-life activists to get over their love affair with a fetus. In other words, we're going to kill as many babies as we want to. Don't love the fetus. I, according to Jocelyn Elders, do not believe that a fetus is a human being. Elders apparently had her own love affair with a condom. She said, and I quote her words, "If I could be a condom queen, I would wear a condom on my head or a crown on my head with a condom on it. I would." End of quote. This is the type people that Bill and Hillary Clinton selected to go into the White House to represent them, moral, clean, Christian America. She became an embarrassment for the Clinton administration and was asked to leave. Then there was Dr. Henry Foster, nominated by Bill Clinton to replace Elders. He couldn't be confirmed because it was revealed that, number one, he performed abortions at his gynecology practice. Number two, that he lied to Congress about having performed those abortions. Number three, he participated in a study to develop an abortion pill. Number four, he misled Congress about his position on abstinence, pre-sexual relationships, versus condom use as a means of birth control. And number five, he alleged that those opposing him were racist. Further investigations into Dr. Henry Foster reveal Foster's knowledge of and participation in a multi-year study that allowed black, low-income syphilis patients to die without any treatment by doctors, so that they could observe the progression of the disease. And he was involved in it, and this program started in the 1930s. Foster claimed he knew nothing of the experiment, but records detailed briefings of medical society members by him during the Foster briefings, and while he was trying to be appointed by the president. So he was discarded. Then there was the Justice Department, or I would like to use the word Department of Injustice. Bill Clinton's top legal advisor, Janet Reno, vowed at her confirmation hearing, quote, "to protect America's children," end of quote. Her words soon became a tragic mockery in the first few months of the administration. On April 19th, 1993, after a 51-day siege at Waco, Texas, in which there was no such thing as a search warrant delivered to the premises, where the person in charge opened the door to welcome two cattle trucks as they moved up, and BATF agents jumped out firing their weapons, not even identifying who they were. After this 51-day siege, and then the FBI stormed their building with tanks, which is illegal according to the 1882 Comitatus Act, which says the military can never be used on private citizens in the United States of America. They also had battering rams. More than 300 canisters of gas, which is known as CS gas. It's flammable and in closed quarters. It was banned by international treaty from use in January of 1993. And yet, April 19th, over 300 canisters at 6 o'clock in the morning began to be injected into the compound. And by noon, there was a fire blazing in which 60 adults and 25 to 26 children were incinerated. She said her job was to protect the children. Then there was Mr. Ron Brown, who was appointed by the Clintons. He was the former Commerce Secretary. He was subject to a year-long investigation into accusations that he accepted $700,000 to help lift the trade embargo against Vietnam. Brown was also under suspicion for possible violation of federal laws in 4 other categories. He failed to disclose financial holdings in official statements. He also received money improperly from business associates. He also had a conflict of interest and lying to and evading Congress. Brown was unapologetic. He didn't try to cover it up. His response to one of the charges was, and I'm quoting the newspaper, "That happens every day," end of quote. Mr. Brown's plane happened to go 10 degrees off course in a short 12 miles and ran into a mountain instead of a landing strip, killing him and 34 individuals with him. Then there was Henry Cisneros. The Justice Department investigated whether Henry Cisneros, the Secretary of Housing and Urban Development, misled FBI agents about payments to a former mistress. He claimed to have stopped making the payments in 1992, but tapes made by the woman show that the payments continued until 1994. So once again, the morality of the Clinton administration went straight down the tubes. Then there was a man by the name of Mike Espy. The Secretary of Agriculture resigned when he came under investigation by an independent counsel for possible violation of government ethics laws. It was suspected that he may have taken hundreds of thousands of dollars worth of free trips, free gifts, some from industries regulated by the Department of Agriculture. And one of the most startling revelations to come from these investigations was the possibility that one of those giants in industry, Tyson Foods in Arkansas, may have given illegal gratuities to other officials, including Bill Clinton when he was governor of Arkansas. This case is still open and ongoing. Then there was Webb Hubbell, serving early in the Clinton administration as Associate Attorney General. Webb Hubbell was the second Clinton associate and Whitewater figure to plead guilty to the Whitewater-related charges. In December of 1994, Hubbell pleaded guilty to mail fraud and income tax evasion in connection with the independent counsel Kenneth Starr's investigation into the Whitewater scandal. Hubbell was also separately accused of improperly billing his legal clients, including the federal government, for thousands and possibly hundreds of thousands of dollars in personal expenses. Hubbell was a confidant of the president, and he was a former law partner of the First Lady, Hillary Clinton. Before heading to jail, Hubbell was the Clintons' most trusted advisor on matters concerning ethics and the law. Can you imagine that? The most trusted ethics and law official in the government, and he's heading to jail for breaking all of it. Then there was Lanny Guinier. Clinton actually nominated her to oversee the federal civil rights laws, or him, I'm sorry. He was forced to withdraw because Bill Clinton could not defend her extremist views, including her advocacy of racist policies for congressional redistricting. She wanted to make sure that when Congress redistributed the votes equally, that it would be on a racial line. And so this hit the newspapers, and it destroyed her opportunity in government. Then there was Ira Magaziner, President Clinton's health czar. Ira Magaziner led secret meetings of his and First Lady Hillary Clinton in a room, closed doors. The record showed that representatives of liberal special interest groups were invited into the closed-door meetings, and that over $15 million of taxpayers' money was spent, and these companies and corporations would have benefited if their laws or their propositions would have gone into law. Hazel O'Leary had been drawn first notice for her extravagant lifestyle at taxpayers' expense. She was a Secretary of Energy. She was supposed to be concerned mostly with domestic energy uses and various issues pertaining to it. But up until the time that she left the White House, she had made 16 trips to exotic destinations ranging from India to Russia. One long weekend, she went to South Africa, extended her stay for an entire week. She took a staff of 55 people plus 68 business executives, all paid for by the taxpayers of the United States. She didn't last too long. Then there was Federico Pena. Clinton's transportation secretary came under investigation to determine whether he acted improperly in awarding a contract to a Los Angeles business associate which was directly related to Pena. That person didn't last either. This is an administration that said, we want to be the cleanest, squeaky clean in the last 30 years. You know what the rules for communist revolution is? Pretend, say everything that the public wants you to hear. When you're elected into office, do everything you can to destroy the whole filthy order. They look at the capitalist system in which we live as a filthy order. So they have done just that. Then I would like to mention a second time, Janet Reno. Janet Reno is still the Attorney General of the United States. She has overseen the most liberal and publicized Justice Department in the United States history. Reno proclaimed publicly, I quote, "My highest priority is not to convict criminals, but to protect their rights," end of quote. Reno was chastised by the United States Senate in a 100-0 vote when she reversed the Bush administration's position on a child pornography case. Reno went to the Supreme Court in defense of an accused child pornographer. Then there's Donna Shalala, Clinton's Secretary of Health and Human Services. Shalala spearheaded the Clinton administration's television and radio condom campaign at a cost to the taxpayers of at least $1 million in the first couple of years in the White House. And one of the first condom ads featured Anthony Kiedis, who was one of the lead players in the Red Hot Chili Peppers band. He also was convicted on a sexual battery charge, indecent exposure in public. This is a background of Mr. Bill and Hillary Clinton, who now occupies the White House of the United States of America. But the Clinton administration is again being revealed for corruption in America because they have been taking from foreign governments and individuals campaign money, and it's going out over the airwaves right now. Not long ago, many analysts came forward with evidence that Bill Clinton received huge payments from Vietnam. In return, he reversed America's decades-long policy with Vietnam, and he normalized United States trade relations with this communist country. Also, do you remember the Japanese auto trade talks in 1996? The Clinton administration promised that they would greatly lessen the number of Japanese imports into the United States that was competition for our own automotive industry. Yet, he reversed his stand. People have come out in the administration privately and said, yes, the president was paid off with huge campaign contributions. Then there's the China deal that has been going on of late. China hated Taiwan, yet against all advice, Bill Clinton gave official recognition to the very highest ranking Taiwanese delegation into the White House. This came after a series of large contributions from Taiwan businessmen to the Clinton administration through a man by the name of Johnny Huang. China was so outraged, she immediately began to retaliate. She started using the coast of Taiwan for long-range missile target practice. And that's where they came out with a statement stating that the United States liked Los Angeles more than Taiwan, so that it better not say a word. But the United States actually risked a confrontation with Communist China. They sent an aircraft carrier group into the area with its entire Navy escort fleet, just in case. But now, don't shed any tears for China. Why? Because they also have made huge campaign contributions to the Clinton administration. In return, the United States continually overlooks the vast human rights violations that China has been charged with throughout the years. North Korea also. Notice all the Asiatic countries, and they're all communist. North Korea also made huge contributions to Clinton's campaign funds. Clinton then approved exporting $10 billion worth of technology and nuclear materials to North Korea. This has led the North Koreans, given them the opportunity to build nuclear reactors. In other words, Bill Clinton supplied one of America's most dangerous enemies with nuclear capability, all for campaign funds. Almost daily, the scandal over Clinton's campaign contributions deepens. And this is very interesting, the next few statements I'm going to make. There was one woman who was the former campaign finance chairwoman. She knew where every contribution came from. It just so happened she turned up dead. For years, Patricia Harriman was up to her neck in Clinton's money trenches and his campaign fundraising. She was the campaign chairwoman. She was in charge of raising the multi-millions of dollars that he needed to win the campaign in 1992 for the presidency. Harriman made huge numbers of deals with private and governmental groups all over the world to receive campaign funds. Then all of a sudden, she was taken off her job. She was made the ambassador to France. Now, what's so interesting here is that this brought about a scandal in itself, because the French ambassadorship is the most coveted assignment of all United States embassies. Yet Harriman had never even been a United States ambassador before. She had not even ever served in the United States Foreign Service. State Department officials were absolutely outraged that Bill Clinton appointed her. Now the scandal over Clinton's campaign contributions could actually blow his presidency out of the water. It could create another Richard Nixon, Spiro Agnew scenario. But since she was the only person on the face of the earth that knew where every contribution came from, all of a sudden, the person who knew it all turned up dead, unexpectedly. Now, what's so interesting about this is that Patricia Harriman had never had any type of a background of illness. All of a sudden, she just died, became sick and died. Now, it's very interesting to me that KGB agents who have defected and come to the United States have said that they have had a type of a liquid that they could actually put into somebody's drink, and they could drink it, and it would give them a supposed heart attack. The person would die, but it could not be found in the bloodstream. They said they'd been using that since 1957 against American and other countries. I wonder what happened to Patricia Harriman. She was not overweight. She was slim. She was not old enough to have a heart attack on the spot when she had never had one single incident before. As a direct result of all of these campaign irregularities, the newspapers are getting hold of it. The Dallas Morning News, Friday, March 7th, 1997, had a syndicated article by a man by the name of George Will. The topic said, "Are laws just for Republicans?" He goes down the entire article showing how Bill Clinton and Al Gore have broken about every law there is. And then he concludes the entire article with the following statement. Regarding this administration, what has been said of promises, and then in parentheses it says, they have kept the promises they meant to keep. Meaning, they did not keep the rest of the promises that they made, only the ones that they knew they would keep. The rest they let go by the boards. Then they said, they observe the laws they want to observe. End of quote. Why have I brought you this very uncomfortable, sordid 30 years of dishonesty, corruption, and reckless ambition of the background of President and Hillary Clinton? Because on March 7th, 1997, there was a press conference because too much heat was being put on the presidency because of all of these items that I've mentioned, especially the campaign funds. After this news conference, and we have it on video so that we'll be able to dissect it, questions followed. There's one woman that's been there probably longer than anybody in this room's been alive. Her name is Helen. Everybody knows her. She sits on the front row every time. And she just comes right out with what's on her mind, and she doesn't hold anything back. And she said, when she was recognized by Bill Clinton, she said, look, there's people in this country now that are saying that people are going to be uprooted out of their homes in Kentucky and Tennessee and moved to other locations. They're saying the United States is going to be turned over to the United Nations, or we're going to lose our national sovereignty. They're saying there's foreign troops and foreign military vehicles in this country. How are we going to stop these people? She wasn't for and inquiring, is this true? She wanted to know, how are we going to shut these people up? And you know, it was very interesting, the answer that Bill Clinton gave. He did not deny one word of what she said. Neither did he say no, nor did he say yes. Rather, he gave several sentences. Basically, it said, we're living in an interdependent world. One country works with another to prevent wars. He said in a summary form, in our world today, it's difficult for one nation to retain its sovereignty. Now, those were my words summarizing what he said. In other words, he used smooth terminology, and only those who understood what's really happening in this country knew that he was saying, yes, all of this is happening because we're going to have a world government. We're interdependent today, and that we cannot have a world today in which we are by ourselves and have our own sovereignty separate and apart from the rest of the world. Does this mean something to you and to me? Yes, it does. His very response to her statement told me that everything that we've been saying in this ministry is true. It's on the verge of happening. And that the United States is being occupied little by little. Fort Polk. And you know what many of the former military personnel that's left the Army says? They say, oh, we've had troops in the United States, NATO troops and so on, having exercises since 1947 after World War II. You know, they're absolutely right. It's true. But we've never turned whole military bases over to a foreign nation. We've never allowed them to bring, excuse me, even their families here and rename streets in their language. We've never allowed foreign military vehicles to come into the streets of America, onto our military bases. We've always used American. But now they're coming here and we have the video footage. You've seen it many times. We've shown it. Notice in Daniel chapter 2. Verse 20 to 22. Here's what God says is going on in the world today. Daniel answered and said, Blessed be the name of God forever and ever, for wisdom and might are His. He changes the times and the seasons. He removes kings and sets up kings. Or you can say presidents. He gives wisdom unto the wise and knowledge to them that know understanding. And the knowledge that He's giving to you and I is the very statement that He made in Revelation 19 verse 10, that the testimony of Jesus is the spirit of prophecy. And we can discern what these statements that these people are making, while the rest of the nation sit there and know nothing of what's going on. And they'll fiddle while Rome burns. You and I can know the truth because God says He's the one that will place in authority those that He wants to fulfill His purpose. Bill Clinton is sitting in that position today. Verse 22 says, He reveals the deep and secret things. He knows what is in the darkness, and the light dwells in Him. So Jesus Christ of Nazareth, who is our God, and we're to have no other gods before Him, and then we can go to the Father in heaven through and by the authority of Jesus, said that you and I will be the ones to have the knowledge if Jesus is truly our Lord and Savior and we've submitted our lives to Him. And those who have truly been baptized, that means when you go down into that watery grave of baptism, you're acting out Jesus' death in your stead. And while you're in that water, He operates on your heart. And He takes away the hostility so that you can begin to learn little by little the truths of this Bible and develop the Spirit of God in us. The fruit of the Spirit, the proper living standard that we are supposed to live by. Notice what Daniel chapter 4 verse 17 says. This is God's words. This explains to us the circumstance we're in today, where a person with 30 years of history of corruption, deceit, is now in the White House of the United States. This matter is by the decree of the watchers and the demand by the word of the holy ones, to the intent that the living may know that the Most High rules in the kingdom of men and gives it to whomsoever He will, and sets up over it the basest of men. I'm glad I'm not President of the United States, because the phrase sets up over it the basis of men would apply. God says He has allowed the government of the United States to go into the hands of those who are corrupt, because the nation at large has become corrupted. As a direct result, judgment will come upon this nation. and by a more fitting hand than those who are already corrupt. God knows what He's doing. Notice Proverbs 29, verse 2. When the righteous are in authority, the people rejoice. Why? Because things are done in a godly manner. Godly legislation is passed. The rules that prohibit God from being in the classrooms, in the Supreme Court, in the courts all over the land are reversed. The Bible is the focus of everything because it's God's Word. But when the wicked bear rule, the people mourn. Brethren, I'm here to tell you, it's not going to be long now, maybe 12, 18 months. The United States of America is going to be radically and totally different than anything that we've seen it before, because the wicked are in charge and there is coming judgment. So I want to encourage each and every person today to make sure that you never lose focus of what God's doing. Lay down all those little things that are out on the tip of the tree limb. Stay close to Jesus Christ, the trunk of the tree, because He's going to be our only hope and our salvation in the days to come.